Have you ever wondered how a seemingly perfect product can just fail? We're going to dive into the paradox of a phone that was literally years ahead of its time, and yet it completely vanished.
Okay, so let's wind the clock back to 2007. On one side, you've got the Japanese Garakee phone. This thing was a beast. It had mobile TV, a digital wallet, it was waterproof, plus a killer camera and battery. It had everything. And on the other side, the very first iPhone, which, let's be honest, had basically none of that. By pretty much every metric, it was the worst device. And yet, the powerhouse is gone. So what happened?
And that right there is the central mystery. How could the product with all the features lose, and lose so badly? Well, the answer isn't about better tech. It's about two fundamentally different, competing ideas of what evolution even is.
Right, so let's get into our first big idea here, these two kinds of evolution. See, this wasn't just a simple fight over features. It was a philosophical war between creating a finished product versus offering a starting point.
The Garakee's whole philosophy was to be the perfect all-in-one tool. They evolved by basically asking users, hey, what do you want? And then just cramming every single requested feature into the phone. The goal was to hand you a flawless, complete product, right out of the box.
So they just kept adding more and more stuff. But here's the catch, and it's a huge one. It was a completely closed system, a walled garden. The mobile carriers were in total control. They decided what you watched, what you used, every single function was locked in from day one. The phone's potential was capped before you even bought it.
And then you have the total opposite approach, the smartphone as an empty box. When the iPhone first landed, a lot of people thought it was a joke. It looked incomplete, almost broken. It was missing all these things everyone thought were essential. But that emptiness, that was its secret weapon.
This was a massive philosophical shift. The iPhone wasn't a finished tool. It was a platform. It was a starting line. By opening up its operating system, Apple basically handed over the keys to developers everywhere. And all of a sudden, you, the user, got to decide what the phone was for. Its value wasn't what it was, but what it could become. Which brings us to our next major point. The real question became, who was in control? Because the battle wasn't really about the phones themselves. It was a fight for the entire ecosystem.
Just look at the power shift right here. In the Garakee world, the mobile carrier was king. They controlled everything. Developers were basically just working for them. But in the smartphone world, the operating system, iOS or Android, became the new king. The App Store was the new gatekeeper, and the carriers, well, they got demoted to just being simple pipes that delivered the internet.
And this is where the story gets really fascinating, because we run right into something called the perfection trap. This is the idea that the Garakee's greatest strength, its sheer perfection, was also its fatal flaw.
You see, these phones were tailored with unbelievable precision for life in Japan. They fit the culture, the way people commuted, everything. They were so perfect for that one market that they effectively evolved on an isolated island, completely disconnected from the global tech scene.
I mean, they had user interfaces anyone could use, special features for being on a packed train, even disaster alerts built in. But by focusing so intensely on perfecting the phone for this one single environment, they completely diverged from the emerging global standards. They built the perfect local product, while the rest of the world just moved on without them.
The result wasn't just a simple failure. It was what you'd call an extinction-level event. And it was all driven by the incredibly high price of being too evolved for a world that was about to change forever.
There's this quote that just nails it. Like the dinosaurs that grew too large, the Garakee were too perfected to change direction. Think about that. The Garakee wasn't weak, it was immense. It was so powerful and so adapted to its little niche that when the climate suddenly changed with the app economy, it just couldn't pivot. It was too big to turn.
And this is a textbook case of what's known as an evolutionary dead end. It's what happens when you become the absolute master of one environment right before that environment completely disappears. All your greatest strengths suddenly become your biggest weaknesses, and adaptation is pretty much impossible.
So, what can we learn from this ghost of a lost future? What are the lessons that the fall of the Garakee can teach us today?
Because look, this isn't just a history lesson about old phones. It's a timeless story about innovation, about strategy, and about survival in absolutely any industry.
The takeaways here are huge. First, perfect hardware just isn't enough. Potential will beat polish. Second, if your whole strategy is protecting the old power structure like the carriers did, you will kill the innovation you need to survive. Third, in platform wars, openness almost always wins. And finally, and this might be the most important one, don't just focus on building a product, build an ecosystem that others can build on top of. Ultimately, the Garakee failed because its makers thought the future was just going to be a better version of the present. But as this whole story shows us, it almost never is. The real future, it often arrives looking like an empty box, just waiting for us to figure out what to do with it.